When we look at a nation's Air Force budget, are we seeing a strategy for defense or the architecture of a national myth? This analysis frames the colossal U.S. Air Force budget not as a simple expenditure, but as a theological statement, a faith in global technological omniscience. In stark contrast, the budgets of rivals like China and Russia are presented as pragmatic heresies, focusing on asymmetrical deterrence and regional denial rather than attempting to build a rival cathedral in the sky. Allied nations, in turn, are cast as a faithful congregation, their spending emphasizing an interoperable reliance on the American military covenant. But what are the unseen philosophical costs of such an overwhelming faith? And how fragile is a cathedral built not of stone, but of code and bandwidth?
What does a number sound like? I mean, not a small number. Maybe it's something you count on your fingers, but one that's just colossal, so huge it seems to almost bend reality around it.
Yeah, like it develops its own gravity, pulling everything else into its orbit.
Exactly. Today we're talking about figures that are, well, they stretch into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Take, for instance, that $230 billion figure often cited for just the U.S. Air Force component. It's a sum that, when you really stop and think about it, makes a sound that's much more complex than just, you know, a bank transfer.
Oh, absolutely. It's not the rustle of cash or the click of a keyboard.
Yeah.
As some of our sources today suggest, thinking of things like the architecture of air power, a global budgetary cosmology.
Why?
This kind of number, it's almost the sound of a silent predator taking flight. Something spectral moving in a darkness decades away.
Wow.
Or maybe it's the hum of 1,000 servers, all dreaming of a war that hasn't happened yet. It's like like the whisper of a new kind of God being assembled piece by very, very expensive piece in these sterile labs and development centers.
A new kind of God. That's a powerful image.
Well, this huge amount of money, especially going to air power, it really shows how nations are basically trying to will a particular future into existence through these massive financial commitments.
And that right there, that's our way into today's deep dive. We're not just looking at military budgets, you know, the line items and totals, or even just the mind-bending figures for air power alone.
Right.
Our mission, really, is to dissect what these enormous financial statements truly reveal about a nation, about its identity, maybe its deepest fears, and certainly its boldest visions for what's next.
Yeah.
We want to get beyond the raw numbers and look at the ideologies they stand for.
Absolutely. Because when you really dig into them, these budgets, they are just financial plans. The sources we're looking at today frame them as modern myths. Even psychoanalytic confessions, almost.
Yeah.
Written in steel and code and just countless hours of strategic thought.
Psychoanalytic confessions. Yeah. That's fascinating.
And yeah, they tell us how nations see their place in the world, what they truly value, and what kind of future they're literally trying to buy into existence. So we'll be drawing on some really insightful analysis, like from the architecture of air power and another piece called The Unspoken Costs of Air Supremacy, to really unpack these bigger implications. Think of it as a shortcut for you, the listener, to grasp the deeper currents shaping global security.
Now, we know this can sound incredibly complicated. You've got technology, geopolitics, economics, all tangled together.
Yeah.
But our promise to you is that we're going to navigate this landscape together.
Yeah, we'll break it down.
We'll try to make the complex details understandable, cut through the jargon, and show you why these massive choices don't just matter to generals in war rooms, but why ultimately they matter to you. We're going to explore how different nations kind of measure their skies. Is it a fortress they need to defend? Is it a blank canvas for projecting power? Or maybe even a hunting ground?
And what's really key here, I think, is that this isn't just about comparing who spends the most money. That's too simple. It's really an interpretation of fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. Different cosmologies, as the source material puts it. Each budget reflects a unique belief system about power, about security, and about the role that nation wants to play. It's about what each nation believes the sky actually represents.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And we really have to start with the first major player, just because of the sheer, almost unbelievable scale of the United States' commitment to air power. The overall U.S. defense budget for 2024, it's hovering around what, $880 billion?
An astonishing figure, just massive.
And out of that enormous pie, the Department of the Air Force, which remember now includes the Space Force too, gets over $185 billion. Think about that number for a second. dedicated solely to air and space capabilities.
And to really put that in perspective, that single slice, just the Air Force's share, around $185 billion, that's more than double the entire military budget of Russia.
Double Russia's entire budget.
The whole thing. A nation stretching across 11 time zones, a major historical military power. And it's way more than the UK's total defense spending, which is, around $70 billion a year, maybe a bit more.
Wow.
Our source, The Architecture of Air Power, puts it really well. It says comparing these is like comparing a theological text to a grocery list.
A theological text versus a grocery list. Explain that.
Well, the U.S. budget, it reads like this sweeping, comprehensive statement of faith. It details a whole vision for the heavens, lists its angels and demons, all written in the cold language of fiscal appropriation. The others, they're more like exercises in necessity, practicality, constraint, just trying to meet immediate, tangible needs.
The source asks, paranoia or prophecy when looking at this huge investment? And that really hits home, doesn't it? Why this incredible difference? Is it driven by this overwhelming sense of threat, maybe even an exaggerated one? Or is it more proactive, like a visionary attempt to shape how global power works in the future?
I think that's the core question.
It feels like more than just money. It's a different philosophy, a different level of ambition for what air power can even do.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I mean, for the United States, air dominance isn't just helpful. It's not just a supplement to troops on the ground or ships at sea. It's seen as foundational, almost sacred, you could say, in their national security thinking.
Foundational.
Think back from the strategic bombing in World War II, hitting enemy factories, right up to the precision strikes in the Gulf War that took out Iraqi air defenses so quickly. Air superiority is consistently framed as the decisive advantage.
So the jet becomes, what did the source say? America's chariot of fire.
Yeah, it's floating temple, it's symbol of omniscience. It's this declaration that says, this is where our ultimate power is, and we plan to project it absolutely anywhere, anytime we choose.
That metaphor you mentioned earlier, the architecture of belief, it really sticks. It makes me think of those huge medieval cathedrals. They weren't just buildings, were they?
Not at all. They were monumental physical embodiments of a whole worldview, a shared understanding of the cosmos. Those massive spires, they didn't just point to the sky. They physically organized the world around them. They defined what was sacred, what wasn't. They were focal points for entire communities, entire nations even.
Why?
And every single stone, every piece of stained glass, every painting inside that represented an enormous investment, not just money, but spiritual energy, generations of skilled work, precious resources. The cost was unbelievable.
But it wasn't just about the cost itself.
Exactly. The real point was the assertion it made. This is what we believe. This is where power resides, whether you see that as divine or earthly power. And when we look at the U.S. Air Force budget today, we're essentially looking at a modern version of that. A ledger of faith. Each line item is like a key article in that belief system. It's not just dollars, it's a statement of intent, of capability, of belief.
And you can really see these articles of faith in things like the B-21 Raider program, can't you? This new stealth bomber. They're pouring billions into it for R&D, for procurement, and it hasn't even flown a single combat mission yet.
It's an incredible leap of faith, isn't it? A huge bet on a future capability.
Definitely.
The sources describe the B-21 as, well, less a weapons system and more like a piece of mobile architecture, a flying cathedral of dread.
A flying cathedral of dread.
Its design isn't just about how it drops bombs, although it will do that very effectively, I'm sure. The fundamental purpose is to project an idea, the idea of being inviolable, of being omnipresent, able to touch any point on Earth without being seen or touched back.
Like a God's gaze. The idea that it could be watching is the power.
Exactly like that. Its power isn't just in what it does, but in the mere possibility of its attention, the knowledge it could be anywhere. So this budget for the B-21, it's like the tithe paid to the god of strategic ambiguity. It promises this constant, unseen threat, creating deep uncertainty for any potential adversary. It basically says, we can reach you and you won't even know we're coming.
And it's not just the big, obvious combat systems either, something most of us use every day, probably without thinking twice. The Global Positioning System, GPS.
Right, totally ubiquitous.
That whole network, it's fundamentally an Air Force project. Developed, maintained, run by them.
And what's fascinating there is the quiet, sort of persistent claim of global influence it makes. By funding and maintaining GPS, America essentially keeps the time and draws the maps for the entire world.
That's a subtle point.
It's this almost invisible yet totally pervasive demonstration of global reach and control. It provides the basic coordinates, the synchronized timing for so much of modern life, civilian and military. Think about it. Modern commerce, communication, even warfare. It would all just grind to a halt without GPS. It's a low-key but profound assertion of controlling the global infrastructure.
But looking even further ahead, the Next Generation Air Dominance Program, NGAD, that seems even more revealing about where this empire of the sky might be heading. The sources call it an ecosystem, not just a plane. Can you kind of break down what that means for us? What does ecosystem imply here?
Sure. When they talk about an ecosystem for NGAD, we're really moving way beyond the old idea of just one super advanced aircraft flying on its own.
Okay.
NGAD pictures this complex, interconnected web. Yes, it includes advanced manned fighters, but the really crucial part is it also involves potentially swarms of autonomous drone wingmen.
Drone wingmen.
Yeah, unmanned aircraft flying alongside, maybe scouting ahead, carrying extra weapons or sensors, and then you've got an array of network sensors, communication nodes, all working together, sharing data constantly.
So it's like one mind spread across many bodies in the sky.
That's a great way to put it. Imagine a single, unified consciousness distributed across the battle space, different parts acting as its eyes, its ears, its weapons, its brain. The ambition isn't just to control the sky with better planes, it's to completely transform the sky into this sentient battle space, an extension of a single, unified will.
Wow.
This budget is basically the financial scaffolding for a new kind of collective intelligence in the air, one that sees the whole globe as one single chessboard, all in real time. It's about getting that literal God's eye view of everything happening, making the sky this fully understood, fully actionable arena where decisions happen at machine speed, way faster than humans could manage.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together, the B-21 self, GPS providing the map, NGAD creating this networked intelligence, what's the fundamental claim the American budget is making here about its role, its power?
What it really boils down to, I think, is that the American budget, through these kinds of investments, essentially proposes that omniscience, knowing everything, is basically just an engineering problem that can be solved.
Right.
And that omnipotence, being all-powerful, is the natural result, the deliverable you get once you solve omniscience. It presumes not just to operate within the heavens, but in a very real way, to actually write the laws of the heavens.
Write the laws of the heavens.
It's a belief in technology so strong that it seeks to eliminate chance, eliminate uncertainty from conflict. It implies that with enough money, enough brain power, any challenge in the air or space can ultimately be overcome.
Okay, let's unpack this more. If the U.S. is building this technological cathedral of omnipotence, this empire in the sky, how do other nations react, especially the big strategic rivals? Do they try and build their own massive cathedrals? Or do they go down a totally different road? You know, every faith system has its core beliefs, its central dogma. And history shows us every faith eventually gets its heretics, right? People who refuse to worship the same way. And just by existing, they challenge those core beliefs.
That's a good analogy.
So in this sort of religion of American air power, we've been describing this architecture of omnipotence. The main heretics have got to be China and Russia.
Undeniably. And what's really fascinating is their strategic approach. They've clearly looked at the absolutely astronomical cost of trying to build a rival cathedral, something to match the American one symmetrically.
Which would be almost impossible for them financially.
Exactly. So with this pragmatism that comes from their own histories, their own constraints, they've chosen a profoundly different strategy. They haven't decided to build a competing heaven. Instead, they've focused their money and effort on making the existing heaven, the American-dominated sky, a very dangerous, very costly place to operate.
So not matching power, but undermining it.
Precisely. It's a strategy of asymmetrical challenge. They know they can't compete symmetrically everywhere, so they hunt for the vulnerabilities, the places they can exploit effectively.
Okay, let's look at China first. Their defense budget, it's huge, it's growing, but it's still number 2 behind the U.S. Estimates put it around, what, $230 to $250 billion?
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
But the sources say this budget tells a really different story strategically compared to the U.S. one.
Absolutely. China's approach, especially with its air power investments, is just a masterclass in this heresy of asymmetry we're talking about. While the U.S. budget is full of tools for global reach, you know, long-range bombers, huge fleets of refueling tankers, global transport planes.
Things designed to go anywhere.
Right. The Chinese budget, on the other hand, is heavily weighted towards what you could call the grammar of refusal. It's not about projecting force globally. It's about creating a space, primarily regional, that's just too expensive, too dangerous for that American god of omnipotence to easily enter.
So their focus is much tighter geographically.
Overwhelmingly regional. Think South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, the immediate Pacific approaches. They aren't really trying to build a global presence in the same way. It's about defending their perceived sphere.
So if America's building an aerial empire, China's building more like a very well-defended fortress in the sky, drawing clear lines.
That's a very good way to put it. And you see this reflected so clearly in where they put their money. Take their integrated air defense systems, IADs. The sources really highlight China's massive spending on advanced radars, complex command and control networks, and really capable long-range surface-to-air missiles.
So for our listeners who follow this stuff, what makes an IAD like China so effective? What are the key parts?
Well, an IADs fundamentally is a layered defense. It uses multiple technologies together. You've got advanced radars, multispectral, trying to detect even stealthy aircraft far out. Then you have powerful surface-to-air missiles like the Russian S-400s they bought, plus their own increasingly sophisticated domestic versions.
Like the HQ-9 series.
Exactly. And crucially, you have robust command and control systems that link all the sensors and shooters together, fusing the data so they can react quickly and coordinate the defense. This isn't the architecture of a cathedral. It's the design of a really effective, multi-layered cage. It's a clear statement that the airspace over the first and second island chains near Taiwan, that's not a global commons in their view. It's sovereign territory they intend to make incredibly dangerous for anyone deemed hostile. A formidable no-go zone.
And then you have the carrier killer missiles, the DF-21D, the DF-26. These always get a lot of attention as key investments.
And rightly so. What's really significant here is that these anti-ship ballistic missiles, they aren't funded to project Chinese power across the oceans. They're specifically designed to deny power projection to China.
To stop the U.S. carriers from getting close.
Precisely. The sources have this great line calling them theological arguments written in solid fuel and terminating in hypersonic velocity against the sanctity of the American aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Theological arguments.
Because the carrier, as we said, is like that mobile piece of the American air power cathedral. China's budget, through these missiles, isn't trying to replicate America's God's eye view. It's trying to blind it, to push those carriers further back, make them vulnerable, create these huge zones of strategic opacity where American omniscience just breaks down.
Zones of opacity, I like that.
It's a faith not in being everywhere, but in creating this sacred defended void. Guarded fiercely. These missiles are built to be fast, maneuverable, specifically targeting those big, high-value ships, making it incredibly risky for a U.S. carrier group to operate within their range.
But China does have its own advanced stealth fighter, the J-20. That seems like it goes beyond just defense, doesn't it? It feels like a direct challenge.
It absolutely is. The J-20's existence is a clear signal that China plans not just to protect its airspace, but also to contest it. And maybe, eventually, project power further out.
So it complicates the purely defensive picture.
It does. And there's this interesting, slightly speculative observation in one source. Its wingspan is a prophecy, a hint that perhaps China's horizon is expanding.
A prophecy.
While their current focus is heavily regional, the J-20, with its stealth, its range, it could signal a longer-term ambition, maybe for greater reach into the Pacific, or even, as the source dramatically puts it, into the orbit of stars themselves. It's a subtle but important sign that their strategic thinking might be evolving beyond just defense towards challenging air superiority more broadly.
Okay, let's shift focus now to Russia. Their defense budget is quite a bit smaller than both the U.S. and China's, around $109 billion. The sources describe it as a different kind of scripture, one written by a declining empire with a long memory and a deep-seated fear of encroachment. That paints a very vivid picture.
It's a really insightful description, I think. It captures the essence of Russia's situation. Their budget reflects this philosophy of targeted, disruptive innovation. It's a strategy that comes from necessity and from this long history of feeling pressured from the outside.
So they can't compete across the board?
No, they just don't have the economic power to go toe-to-toe symmetrically with the U.S. everywhere. So Russia invests heavily in what you could call the art of the asymmetrical sting.
The asymmetrical sting.
Yeah. They can't build a rival global air force Force, so they focus on developing these niche, high-impact capabilities, things designed to disrupt and deny rather than to dominate in a broad sense. It's about getting disproportionate effects from limited resources.
And how does that show up in their spending? The sources note they keep a lot of older planes flying, like Su-27s, MiG-29s, but they upgrade them. But there's also a big emphasis on hypersonics. It seems like a mix.
It is. They definitely modernized their legacy fleet, those older Sukhois and MiGs, partly for numbers, partly for deterrence. But their real strategic bets, the things they hope will be game changers, are revolutionary technologies like hypersonics.
Like the Kinzhal missile and the Zircon.
Exactly. Weapons like the Kinzhal, which is air-launched, and the Zircon anti-ship missile. These aren't about controlling the sky in the traditional way. They're designed as a direct rebuttal to the American faith and sophisticated missile defense systems.
Because those defenses are designed for older types of threats.
Right. They're designed for predictable trajectories, slower speeds. Hypersonics are meant to punch through those defenses. They move too fast. They can maneuver unpredictably. The idea is to make the established liturgy of interception, as the source calls it, basically useless against them, to overwhelm the system.
So if the U.S. is building this complex shield, Russia is developing a faster, more agile spear specifically designed to get through it.
That's a perfect analogy. The Russian budget, compared to the American one, is lean, almost skeletal in places, but it's honed. It focuses on modernizing their nuclear deterrent bombers, missiles, subs, and developing these specific disruptive weapons that are designed to create strategic paralysis in a crisis.
Strategic paralysis,
Yeah.
meaning make the cost of intervention too high.
Precisely. To create a terrible dilemma for any potential adversary. Step in, and you risk facing these devastating strikes that you might not be able to stop. If the American budget is the sprawling, epic novel about global control, the Russian one is more like a collection of terse, menacing poems.
Menacing poems.
It's the doctrine of a cornered bear, maybe. One that knows it probably can't win a long, drawn-out fight, but can make absolutely sure that anyone who comes into its territory leaves badly hurt, or faces a cost that's just unacceptable.
So just comparing the dollar amounts really does miss the whole point, doesn't it? It's not about the size, but the intent.
Completely. It's like, comparing the weight of a brick to the weight of a lever that can move a mountain. One's just mass, the other is about leverage.
Right.
The Chinese and Russian budgets are instruments of leverage. They're carefully designed to use smaller resources to affect much larger ones. They're essentially arguments written in budget lines that the great American cathedral of air power, despite all its majesty, has vulnerabilities. It has glass windows that can be broken by these carefully aimed asymmetrical threats. They're forcing everyone to rethink what dominance actually means now.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. If the U.S. is building this empire in the sky, and China and Russia are finding these clever asymmetrical ways to poke holes in it, what about the allies? The ones standing with the U.S., how do their air power budgets fit into this whole complex picture? What does that relationship actually look like?
It's definitely true that no belief system exists on its own, right? It needs followers, believers. People whose own safety and future are tied into it. So the American air budget, as huge as it is, doesn't exist in isolation. You have to factor in key allies: Japan, South Korea, Australia, and of course the NATO countries in Europe.
That's such a crucial point, and it often gets lost when we just focus on the U.S., China, and Russia. These allied budgets, one source calls them the prayer books of the congregation.
The prayer books.
And the defining feature, the word you see again and again across almost all these allied defense plans, especially for air power, is interoperability.
Interoperability, meaning they have to be able to work together seamlessly. Exactly. Their systems, their planes, their communication networks, they're specifically designed to plug into and operate within the broader framework that's largely set by the United States. It's about speaking the same operational language, using compatible gear.
And nothing seems to symbolize this covenant of interoperability more than the F-35 Lightning II, does it? You see that plane everywhere on allied shopping lists. The UK, Norway, Italy, Netherlands, Japan, South Korea, Australia. It's becoming almost the standard allied fighter.
It really is. And the source material suggests this aircraft is much more than just a fighter jet. It's described as a sacrament of the alliance.
A sacrament, wow.
Buying the F-35, it's like being initiated into the networked consciousness of American air power. Its advanced sensors, its data links, its whole mission system. They're designed not just for individual dogfights, but specifically to fuse data from everywhere into one shared real-time picture of what's happening.
A common operating picture.
Right. And here's the kicker. The primary architect and interpreter of that shared picture is the United States. So, buying the F-35 means buying into that specific way of seeing and operating. It creates a common language, a shared understanding, and a really deeply integrated way of fighting together. It's an investment in a collective security system, but one with a very clear central hub.
So when we see allies, like Germany recently, deciding to boost defense spending and specifically buy F-35s, it's not really about them forging their own independent paths for air power.
Not primarily, no. In Germany's case, for example, it was largely seen as a reaffirmation of its commitment to the transatlantic relationship, specifically to its role in NATO's nuclear sharing arrangements and collective defense. It wasn't driven by some new vision of German global air projection.
So these allied budgets are kind of like echoes of the main U.S. budget philosophy.
In many ways, yes. They fund the essential supporting infrastructure, the bases that can host U.S. planes, the aerial tankers needed to refuel them, the standardized maintenance facilities, the shared intel networks, all the things that allow that American cathedral to be a truly global institution, not just a national one. They are the financial manifestation of a shared security promise, where the main guarantor's power is so vast that the key role for others is often just ensuring they can connect seamlessly when needed.
But this does raise a sort of quiet, maybe slightly uncomfortable question, doesn't it? Something that the sources touch on. Is this really a partnership of equals? Or is it leaning towards a kind of technological vassalage?
It's a really profound and legitimate question, and it's right there at the heart of these modern alliances. The F-35 definitely offers incredible capabilities to allied air forces. It plugs them into this powerful network.
Right.
But it is also effectively a tether. It binds their national security very tightly to a technological and strategic system that, while they can influence it, they don't ultimately control. It's like the source asks, when a dozen nations all decide to buy the exact same key made by the same locksmith, do they all get equal access to a shared house? Or did they just make it easier for the master of the house to let himself in whenever he wants, maintaining a certain level of oversight? It's complex. Shared security absolutely comes with a degree of dependence and strategic alignment.
And what about Europe as a whole? Collectively, European nations spend nearly $300 billion on defense each year. That sounds like a lot, but the sources say it's divided among many states and priorities, so it looks different on the ground.
Yeah, what's really striking about Europe is how fragmented its sky still is, despite that big collective number. Unlike America's single, unified air empire, European air forces are more like a mosaic. You see all these different national histories, separate strategic priorities, political compromises playing out.
Even within NATO.
Even within NATO, which provides that crucial cooperation framework. But national pride, industrial interests, they often slow down or prevent really deep integration of air forces and doctrines. So Europe's collective budget, while large on paper, doesn't quite translate into the same kind of unified, agile, globally projecting force that the U.S. has.
Are they trying to change that?
Yeah.
What about projects like FCAS or Tempest?
They are definitely trying. Those next generation projects, FCAS involving France, Germany, Spain, and Tempest, led by the UK, with Italy and Japan now involved, are hugely ambitious. They're not just about building new jets. They aim to integrate manned fighters, unmanned drones, advanced networking, AI, really shape future air combat.
But they're still a long way off.
Exactly. Right now, they're mostly promises, architectures for tomorrow that are still years, maybe decades, away from being fully operational reality. So for the foreseeable future, Europe largely remains under America's very large aerial umbrella, even while it quietly debates whether it needs to build a stronger, more unified one of its own.
Okay, so we've looked at the U.S., the challengers, the allies. What does this all mean? Beyond the dollars and the strategies, what are the hidden costs? The deeper unseen consequences of these huge global investments in air supremacy that maybe we as citizens don't really think about.
Yeah,
this is where we get into the shadows cast by these enormous budgets. What's the real price beyond the money of believing you're the undisputed master of the sky? The sources talk about something called strategic atrophy. That sounds concerning.
It's a really critical idea and often overlooked. When you possess a tool as powerful, as sophisticated as, say, the U.S. Air Force, a hammer designed for incredible precision and overwhelming force, there's a real danger that every complex global problem starts to look like a nail.
A nail that can be hit precisely from far away.
Exactly. It encourages this reliance on technological fixes for problems that are often deeply political, social, or ideological, things that really need much more nuanced, on-the-ground approaches.
What, drone warfare? Is that an example?
Drone warfare is perhaps the ultimate expression of this, isn't it? It offers the promise of sterile, risk-free force projection. War fought by algorithm, viewed on a screen, often feeling very disconnected from the messy realities and consequences down below. It's like the Midas touch of air power supremacy, as one source puts it. Everything it touches risks turning into a target, and that can blur lines, create resentment, and have unintended strategic blowback.
And then there's this paradox. Building something incredibly complex and powerful can actually make it more fragile. That feels wrong intuitively. How does that work?
But it's absolutely true. Think about it. A system as complex as modern air power, so deeply networked, relying on flawless signals from satellites, secure data links, incredibly complex software, highly trained people. It inherently has countless potential points of failure.
I see. The connections are the weak points.
Exactly. And those heretical doctrines from China and Russia we talked about, they understand this vulnerability very well. Their big investments in electronic warfare, anti-satellite weapons, cyber attacks, they are primarily aimed at punching through the armored skin of a fighter jet.
They're aimed at the network.
Precisely. They're targeting the delicate, invisible nervous system that brings the whole air power ecosystem to life. The data links, the command signals, the GPS timing, the very connections that make the ecosystem function as one thing. The American budget builds this incredibly complex, integrated technological marvel. The rival budgets are partly focused on figuring out how to make it fall apart. The bigger and more intricate the cathedral, the more devastating the fall of just one critical stone.
But maybe the deepest cost isn't even operational or strategic. Maybe it's philosophical. A budget this huge doesn't just buy planes. It buys a certain way of seeing the world, right?
Yeah.
A specific lens.
I think that's perhaps the most profound cost. It reinforces this powerful narrative of exceptionalism, of control, this belief that history, conflict, global problems, they can somehow be managed, maybe even solved from 30,000 feet, or from a control room thousands of miles away.
Which can make it harder to see the ground truth.
Ironically, yes. That elevated perspective can make it much harder to understand problems from the bottom up, potentially hindering more diplomatic, economic, or human-focused solutions. And, crucially, think about the opportunity costs.
Right, all that money.
All that immense intellectual capital, all that financial resource, diverted into what the sources call the ever-spiraling scholasticism of military technology. Think what that capital could do if applied to climate change, or pandemics, or poverty, or sustainable energy.
It creates a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The belief in the necessity of air dominance demands a huge budget. And the existence of that huge budget constantly reinforces and justifies the original belief. It's a perpetual cycle.
And this links back to that idea of budgets as psychoanalytic confessions. Every billion spent on a stealth jet is a billion not spent on schools, hospitals, roads, clean water, the quiet stuff that actually makes life better day to day.
And those choices, seen through that psychoanalytic lens, become incredibly revealing of national anxieties. America's budget, chasing omnipotence, maybe reveals a deep fear of becoming irrelevant, a fear that without total dominance, things fall apart. Russia's focus on disruptive strikes perhaps shows a fear of being erased, ignored, its historical weight forgotten.
In China.
China's focus on that defended void, maybe a profound fear of encirclement, that its rise will be choked off if it can't control its immediate surroundings. And Europe's fragmentation. Perhaps a fear of disunity, that without some shared project, internal divisions will pull it apart. These aren't just budget lines, they're like raw nerves of national identity and fear laid bare.
So looking ahead, this is maybe the most crucial question. How do things like AI, drone swarms, hypersonics, how do they change what air dominance even means? Are these massive budgets actually building for the right kind of future war? Or are we maybe, globally, building for a war that won't happen that way while missing the signs of the conflict that's already starting?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? The one keeping strategic planners up at night everywhere. Maybe the next big war won't be primarily about pilots and expensive jets. Maybe it'll be fought by huge coordinated swarms of cheap autonomous drones.
Or maybe not fought with kinetics at all.
Exactly. Maybe it's not about bombers and missiles, but about algorithms disabling command systems or cyber attacks crippling infrastructure before a shot is even fired in the traditional sense. The real danger is whether these enormous budgets, often locked into procurement plans that last decades, are actually building for a war that will never come while ignoring the one that is already arriving.
A war fought in cyberspace or the electromagnetic spectrum.
Or with entirely new kinds of weapons we're only just beginning to imagine. The nature of conflict is changing so fast, and these huge, complex structures of air power might need to change just as fast, or risk becoming magnificent, expensive relics.
We've walked through these ledgers, we've tried to unpack the numbers, the philosophies, but you're right, it's not the numbers themselves that really stick with you, it's the silence they leave behind. A silence filled with questions. Hashtag tag outro over. So we kind of come full circle back to where we started this deep dive. These budgets, they really are much more than just numbers, however big those numbers are. They're like these complex, coded stories that nations tell themselves and the world about who they are, what they fear, and where they think they're headed. It's
this whole ecosystem, isn't it? An ecosystem of competing beliefs about what power actually means in the 21st century. It's definitely not a simple ladder, with the US at the top and everyone else just trying to climb up. Each nation, through how it spends its money, through its strategic choices, is expressing a unique worldview, a different vision for the sky and its own place under it.
We've read the scripture, as it were. We've tried to understand the dogma, explore the consequences. But we want to leave you, our listener, with a final, maybe unsettling thought to carry away.
What happens when a faith this strong, this belief in technological dominance from the air, is truly tested by a future it didn't quite anticipate? What happens when the heretics, with their clever asymmetrical thinking, actually find a real crack in that cathedral wall? Or what if the congregation itself, the allies, maybe even the home population, starts to doubt the power of the sky god they've built at such an enormous expense? What happens when the sky, which has been seen for so long as this ultimate high ground, this sanctuary, this perfect vantage point, what if it becomes something else entirely? What if it becomes contested, fragmented, maybe even like a broken mirror, reflecting back not dominance, but vulnerability?
That silence that follows that question. It's not empty, is it?
No. It feels like the sound of the world is holding its breath, wondering if the old rules of air power are about to be completely rewritten.
So what do you think, having explored these complex skies with us today? Is America's vast aerial empire primarily a shield protecting against global chaos? Or is it also a kind of gilded cage, maybe trapping resources and attention, limiting other kinds of progress?
And is the future really going to be shaped just by who spends the most money? Or will it be shaped by those who find new, maybe unexpected ways to imagine, to contest, and ultimately to redefine what control of the sky even means?
You're standing with us now, right at the edge of that silence.
Do you step forward into that uncertainty where maybe new ideas about security, maybe even cooperation could emerge? Or do you stay under the shadow of those familiar, powerful wings? Comforted, perhaps, but maybe also haunted by their immense cost and the very real questions they force us to ask about the future we're collectively building. The choice, as always, is yours to consider.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.